Hey, welcome. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whenever you are listening to us. It's another edition of the ROI Brothers. I'm Lewis Howard,
Joe Jonart.
and we are back to give you some more insights on just giving you the path to success and financial independence, right? That's what we're
Yeah,
doing,
that's what we're
right?
always trying to do, man.
And have you ever been misunderstood?
Always misunderstood. It
Right,
seems like it.
misunderstanding, misconception. So we thought today would be a good idea to talk about some myths or misconception when it comes to home ownership,
Right?
especially those of you that are starting out in the process for the very first time and learning as you go. So we've discovered some few insights through our experience and what we've learned, and so we want to talk about that. Some things that Joe would just right get in the way or miss.
Yeah, people kind of set up their own walls of why they can't achieve something, right?
Yeah,
People are always throwing up their own roadblocks, so to speak.
absolutely,
And we want to
absolutely.
kind of debunk those, defunk those,
Yep.
and get you out of that mystified atmosphere that you might be, operating in, and try to tell you how you can achieve these goals.
Absolutely, and set you up for success. So, all right, the first one, Joe. What would be the one? We were talking about affordability, right?
Yeah, I think we're always about that, right?
Yeah,
Trying to do
yeah,
the right thing,
yeah,
trying to get
yeah,
people into home ownership, gaining equity as opposed to paying rent. And I
yeah.
think the main thing you got to get over that main roadblock, myth number one, if we want to call it, is I can't afford to buy a home,
Right,
Lewis.
can't afford it.
I can't afford it.
Right,
There's just no way.
right. I see something I like, but how do I know if I can afford it?
Yeah,
And how do I do some quick calculations or get something? And
right.
I would say the first mistake that people make is don't try to be a DIY when it comes to it, right? Because that's what you got qualified professionals. Maybe they'll see something you don't. So they may be able to overcome that myth by just simply looking at an angle of your finances or resources that you don't see.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to say that. And the only example I would use is sometimes people feel really comfortable DIYing like
Yeah,
their taxes,
yeah,
and they'll do them on TurboTax. But the truth of the matter is if you look at the statistics, those that use a CPA or a tax professional usually will get a better refund, have better long-term strategy and planning. And that's all we're trying to say is utilize the professionals. Again, we're not trying to hide it here.
right.
We're in that game. So
Yeah.
we'd love to be the ones that help you with it, but you know, again, I think that's the main thing is utilizing the professionals.
Yeah, and a quick story is when I first bought my first house and I was actually selling real estate,
Hmm.
and the first thing I told myself was, I can't afford this.
Hmm.
Right? Because I'm thinking
Everybody does it.
about down payment, I'm thinking about monthly payment, I'm thinking about
Hmm.
all those things, and I literally almost talked myself out of it simply because I thought I couldn't afford
And you
it.
don't know what you don't know.
You don't know what you don't know, especially when you're trying to do something for the first time. Your mind, can kind of lead you astray. So, what we're saying is get the right information up front
Right.
and do the research
And know your numbers.
and
And
know.
that's what
Well,
we're here to
yeah,
do is help you figure out what the affordability is. So we're kind of segueing into myth number two, I guess, right? Which
yep.
is most people think what, Lewis? They got to put how much down?
Like 20%,
Yeah.
25% down,
I
some,
mean, that's crazy.
right?
That's absolutely crazy. In this market, still being in this business 20 years,
Yeah,
I still run into people that think you have to put
right,
20%
right.
down. And I would love to tackle that number
Sure,
and show people what that looks like. Hey,
right,
if you took X amount of time to try to save to get to the point where you can put the 20% down,
right,
the price of that home done increased.
right, right. And that's a big number. So, if you're talking about $800,000 house, and
400,000, even
yeah, that's
five, depending on where you live,
right. Yeah,
right?
depending on where your part
And
of
the
the world
type of
is.
property.
Absolutely. So there are ways to preserve your capital so you don't have to put all your money into down payment. And I
Right.
think that started as a myth after the crash where lenders were being a little bit more conservative and their standard was 20% down.
Yes.
And so they were trying to do away with people that, didn't have as much skin in the game. But
Right.
there are plenty of programs out there that are zero down, 1% down, 3% down,
Yep.
5% down.
Yep. And depending on again where you're at,
Yeah.
like you said, there's different programs. If you're out in the rural areas,
Yeah.
we'd love to help you with that. That's USDA. You can
Yeah.
utilize those programs there. We've got down payment assistance, like Lewis said. We have access to all those kinds of things. You may be in an income bracket as
Yeah.
well
Yeah.
that allows you to qualify for certain programs.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So, I think all those things are all valid. We've all done it, before buying my first place as well. I think I went through that same thing. Had I not been in the industry,
Yeah.
I looked at those numbers and went like, wait, it might take me a year or two to save the
Sure.
amount of money to put down.
Sure.
Whereas, why not get in the game right now? Stop
Right.
paying the rent
Right.
and pay my mortgage and build equity at the same time. You might pay a little bit more on the monthly, but it always works out, man. I'd love to show people that.
Absolutely. And so, if you're a renter, and that's who we're probably talking about for a lot of those in this first stage of it, and it's renting versus home ownership, right?
Right.
Is it better to be a renter or is it better to be a homeowner?
I got
right?
graphs for that, Lewis.
Right?
I
Right?
got pictures.
And so we've got, different conversations out there, people that just say it's better to rent to versus better home ownership. And I can tell you unequivocally, home ownership is better. It's
Yeah.
just better.
Your net worth is always more. Again, there's statistics on that. You know me, I'm such a statistic
Yeah.
guy. I keep
Yeah.
saying that name.
Yeah.
But that really is the reality, is that there is a way to figure out. There are situations, and again, I'll just give a quick example. I had a client who worked at Microsoft. And if you're from the Northwest, you should probably know who that company is, right? He made a good amount of money,
Yeah.
but he had a situation, single guy, no kids, no wife, no significant other. He was literally paying, and you know what the prices of rent are in Redmond.
Right.
This was a long time ago. He's paying $300 a month in rent. And he was like, Joe, I don't really need to buy a home. He
Right.
goes, I'm gonna take the extra 2,000, 2,500, $3,000 that he would have paid in a mortgage.
Yeah.
But he was smart. He didn't go out and buy a depreciating asset.
Right.
He invested in it properly.
Yeah.
So that the time when he did get married
Right.
and he ended up having kids, he had X amount of money on the side,
Yeah.
was able to put down as a down payment, and we leveraged that appropriately.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I think that goes along with, what does it take to get into the home ownership game, which should bring us to myth number 3, Lewis.
Right.
What could that be? What's the other thing people
Let's
think?
see.
It's about credit.
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 Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Credit.
Credit is a big thing
Yeah.
that, depending on where you grew up,
Right.
credit may have been something that you were told about.
Yeah.
Now, on my side of the tracks,
Right.
credit was nothing we ever talked about.
Right.
It was like, if you
Right.
can't pay cash for it, you can't
Yeah.
get it. And guess
Yeah.
what? We didn't get
You
it.
didn't get it.
We didn't have much.
Yeah, yeah. Credit is a big conversation because it has to do with your fiscal management of your debt, of money, and if you come from a group that wasn't really taught that, and many people were not.
They weren't.
That you didn't understand the value of credit or the asset of credit and what it can do.
How it can be utilized and,
How can be-
leveraged.
yeah, and so, but lenders understand that. I mean, Joe understands that because he's worked with so many people that have had marginal credit that probably
Yeah.
would have been turned down, so many other places, and you're able to put
Help
those
them
people
out.
in home
Yeah.
ownership.
And again, I think the most important thing, and this is not a myth, it's really not about credit. Is something you can always work with.
Yeah.
You cannot manufacture income. If you have the income and you have the potential to pay a few $100s more than what you're paying in rent, but you can own, that's something. That's somebody we can help. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Without
yeah,
a
and so
doubt.
don't be deceived about how the industry talks about a 530 credit score. You need an 850 credit score.
No.
You don't. You're not out if you have 530, and you're not even guaranteed if you have 850 because you might have a lot of debt with that 850.
And we see that all the time
score.
too.
So
We call them the
so
Joneses.
don't rule yourself out because you have credit challenges because you've also got resources that can help people fix that credit, right?
Yes, yeah, and some people try to do that on their own. Again, I would say seek the advice of a professional on that. Sometimes that
Yeah, there
you
are
get what you
companies
pay for.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
there are companies out there that help you with that. So there are resources that. So if you're looking at your situation, man, I'm not going to even try,
Right.
Because I've got that. I would say check and see, and don't be ashamed, don't be embarrassed, because we've seen it,
We've seen it.
right? So
We've seen it.
We've seen it. So
And I think another thing, as we're trying to go through these, kind of 5 things that we were talking about, like these myths or debunking, is, and you alluded to it already, is, number 4 to me is renting is cheaper than buying.
Yeah.
And I think we just kind of proved that,
Yeah.
yes, on a monthly basis, it could be less,
Yeah.
but look at what you're giving up when you do that.
Absolutely.
You have no ownership.
yeah, and I said a couple shows ago, you're either in somebody's liability column or you're in somebody's asset column.
And you want to
Right.
be in your own asset.
You won't be in your own asset column.
Right.
And when you're renting, it might be convenient, but you are paying somebody else's mortgage. You are building equity for someone else, and they're getting a tax write-off for you, and you are not.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
those are things you have to, it's about the future. Like saying golf, you're either playing the short game or you're playing the long game. Homeownership is about playing the long game.
Yeah.
And it's about building wealth and starting wealth that you can pass
It can
on
be
to the
some
next
of the
generation.
it can be one of the largest assets
Yeah.
that people own. And we also
Yeah.
said this in a previous show. I think we alluded to the fact that there is over 34 trillion in equity in this country. And that equity is not from renters.
No, no, no.
But hey, in wrapping up kind of this, let's
Yeah.
go through I would say myth number 5, and we may have to do a whole show on this
yeah.
because you being the former big builder,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
in that industry, you understand the nuances and the difference between buying new
Yeah.
versus buying old, because that's a myth that's
Oh,
out there.
that's a whole
people say
argument
you
in
got to buy
itself.
new or you got to buy old. There's pros and cons to both. Wouldn't you
Absolutely,
agree?
absolutely, there is because it's real estate. First of all, is location, location, location.
Thank you, thank
You know, and if I can find a good existing resale house in a good location,
Yep.
I'm going to take that all day long, right?
Yep, yep.
And I may have to pay more for a new house, right? But I may be able to get that same house that's got some miles on it. That's a better value.
That's a better value, and you can make it how you want it.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
again, I think we probably need to do a whole
Oh, I
show
think
just
the whole
on
segment.
that.
I mean, do
A whole
like
segment
20
on that.
things on just the advantages and
new
disadvantages
and old.
over them. But we'll continue the conversation, and also we'll put a link in, so maybe throw some other thoughts in. So we want to continue to help you be the very best of yourself financially and fiscally, and get out of the matrix.
That's right. Leave it.
Hey, it's another edition of the ROI Brothers. We'll see you again. Stay tuned. Keep following us. Share, care. Tell somebody you know. We'll check with you a little bit later.
Take care, everybody.